This is the first in a series of knowledge sharing sessions on the virtual platform. The initiative includes a series of webinars, videos, and content that will be shared during the week on the main challenges that organizations and your peers face in identifying, managing, and developing high potentials. We hope these webinars will serve as an eye-opener to several questions that organizations face in high potential management, such as who is a high potential and how do you identify them? When do you tell them they've been identified? What if you lose your high force? Does high potential always equal high performance? You can keep abreast of the latest happenings all week on Twitter. The Twitter hashtag for the event is WriteHypoWeek, and you can also find out all about the updates for this week on the People Matters website. The URL is www.peoplematters.in/hypo-week. Without any delay, I'll hand it over to Tuhina Panda, Project Leader and Internal Change Manager at Right Management, to take it further. Over to you, Tuhina.
Thank you, Vikram. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of a series as part of the Hypo Week. We will be starting off with an introduction just to share with you what is it that we have planned for today, and in terms of what is the agenda. We first of all, I would want to just share a little bit about today's topic and what is it that we have planned in terms of the discussion. We all understand that high potential development is a key part of all our leadership development programs, and many organizations have been running these programs as part of their development initiatives. But when it comes to specifically high potential development, the most important part is identifying the right audience. So as part of today, we would want to go a little bit more deep dive into just identifying high potentials and how do you kind of go about it. So first of all, who is a high potential employee? How do organizations go about identifying these employees? What are probably the parameters which we should consider? And are there any benchmarks which I can consider while going about identifying the right process in identifying high potentials? With this, I'd like to introduce our two facilitators for today, and just share a short introduction on them. We have first Sarah Wong, who is OD Director of Associated British Foods, Greater China. She has over 20 years of work experience in the OD and HR space, and for the past over 10 years has been in management positions across Fortune 500 companies. Sarah was previously also with BAT, Greater China, with Mars, has also worked with Novartis and Emerson Process Management. It's a great pleasure to have Sarah on board with us and share the story of ABF and what they have been doing with regard to identifying high potentials and managing the process. We also have Sean Deneen, who is a principal consultant with Right Management. Sean has over 10 years plus work ex in the space of leadership development, OD, and assessments. He is our APAC Center Head for Excellence on Leadership Assessments. Sean has written a lot of papers and is a subject matter expert in this space, and it's really, again, a pleasure to have him on board and share his view on what Right Management has been doing in terms of identifying high potentials and how we have been working closely with our clients in the same space. So on to you now, Sean.
Hello everyone, this is Vikram again from People Matters. I think Sean has unfortunately dropped off the call. So,
Hello?
why? Hello?
This is Sean here. Can you hear me? Yes.
Fantastic.
Very
Sean, we
sorry
waiting for
about
you.
that. Okay. Very sorry about that, everybody. Had a little bit of a technical challenge there, but it sounds like everybody can hear me now. So it's my pleasure to be here today. Sorry about the challenge there, but I think this is a topic that's of strategic importance to so many organizations, not only from a business continuity standpoint, but certainly in terms of sustaining future growth for organizations. So it's also a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. And what I want to do is I want to start off with sharing some market research that we've been doing in India. And we've been collecting data since late last year and early this year. And what we've been able to do is we've focused on 3 different segments. One is getting input from business sponsors in terms of, what are they doing in terms of high potential management. And specifically, we're going to look at, identification for the purpose of our call today. And we define business sponsors as individuals who are thought leaders, individuals who are really the owners of the high potential development program. And these are individuals who typically hold C-level titles. So you can see some of the demographics for these individuals, the types of organizations, the level of turnover within their organizations. So we had a nice diversity of responses there. Then we also wanted to get input from program managers. So these are the types of individuals that are designing and executing the high potential program themselves. And again, you can see some of the breakdown here. And we had a nice diversity in terms of responses. And some of these individuals, hold HR head roles. A lot of them are within the HR function. And then finally, we wanted to get the actual perspective of participants themselves. So these are actually high potentials or individuals that were actually nominated for a high potential development program. And what I want to do is share with you some of the data cuts, some of the information that we actually collected in terms of identification. So one of the things that we asked was, what's the most important criteria or factor in terms of selecting a high potential to these 3 different stakeholder groups? And you can see that most of them had indicated that an employee's potential is the most important factor in terms of being selected for a high potential program. And you can see, probably to no surprise, employees' performance was second on that list. Some of the other factors, such as tenure in the organization, the employee's level within the organization, the criticality of their role, seem to be less important in terms of selection criteria. Then we also wanted to know, what's the actual selection process? So how does that actually work for the high potential program? Is it through a nomination? Is it through maybe a more comprehensive assessment process? Is it more based on performance? And you can see that in this case, it's primarily being driven from a manager's nomination. So that's probably not a surprise to many of you on the call, and that's something that we see is pretty common in most organizations today. But it does open up some challenges, particularly because what we find is that a manager's ability to evaluate and really identify potential is not a foolproof process. So it's mired with subjectivity, it's mired with challenges, particularly if organizations are not properly investing in training managers to be able to do that. So, one of the challenges with having managers drive the nomination process is subjectivity. And that's something that we want to address in today's discussion because we think that this process deserves more objectivity. And we want to talk about some strategies for that. So let me share some additional research that we also conducted to see, what else is being done in the workplace, and what else are we learning from other surveys. And typically what we're finding is that high potential programs are on the rise. They're growing. What we see is that when in a longitudinal study that was tracking 21 major corporations from 1994 through to 2012. Well, back in 1994, only 42% of those major corporations had a high potential program in place. And now we see come 2012, 100% of those organizations actually had high potential programs. When we look at Fortune 100 companies, we see that 55% of those companies have these types of programs in place, and the 100% of the top quartile companies. So clearly, it seems to be a differentiator in terms of some of the high-performing companies. The other thing that we see is that high performance is not necessarily high potential. But what we see is the lines tend to blur in practice when we start to look at how it's being executed in terms of high potential talent management. So what we find is that actually in terms of the total high performer population, only about 29% of those are actually high potentials. But we also see that about 93% of high potentials are high performers. In most organizations, if a high potential's performance declines, they no longer would be valid to be in the high potential pool. So, the performance and potential paradox, tends to blur the lines at times, and I think organizations struggle with that. The other thing that we see is the criteria for selection of high potential talent varies considerably. We're only seeing that about 43% of organizations they're not really using a systematic approach right now to actually identify their high potentials. And when we look at the perspective of the actual high potential participants themselves, only 12% believe that selection approach is impartial or objective. And what we find is that only about 35% of organizations use talent assessment tools. So, while many organizations are actually putting in place programs to manage high potential talent, what we're seeing is that they still have significant challenges in terms of having a real systematic and objective process. So what are some of the key considerations that we want you to think through in terms of how you could identify your high potentials? How could you bring more objectivity to the process? So I think first and foremost, why? Why should we consider investing in our high potential talent? And there's been a lot of research in this space, and this is something that the Corporate Executive Board published a few years ago. But what they found is that a high potential employee is more than 50% more valuable to their respective organization than the average employee. And the challenge that we see is that when organizations put high performers into a level that they shouldn't be, they almost have no chance of being successful. And a lot of times they serve as kind of a holdup in succession strategies. So they're really clogging that leadership pipeline, particularly if they don't have the proper leadership DNA to be successful at the next level. When we do see organizations successfully managing this process, what we find is that they enjoy direct and measurable financial performance advantages over their peers. So there's certainly a correlation between successful high potential talent management and business performance. So I think it's important to align around the definition, and we certainly have a definition at Right Management of what a high potential is. And what we believe a high potential individual is these are either individual contributors or managers who could successfully perform in leadership roles that are at least 1 to 2 levels above their current role, ideally over the next 2 to 5 years. So there's a number of different definitions out there. This is what Right Management believes a high potential employee is. And what I want to do is share with you a little bit about, how we can start to identify them, what are some of the factors, and one of the most important things to make clear is that high potentials can exist at multiple levels within the leadership contribution framework. So these are individuals, as indicated, that could be an individual contributor, but they could also be individuals at a first-line manager role who have potential to move up to either a middle manager and beyond. They could be middle managers who could move up into a functional leader or beyond, or they could be a functional leader who could move into a business leader role. And the best organizations put in place systematic programs that allow them to build talent pools at multiple levels in the leadership contribution framework, so that they have a sustainable process and a sustainable pipeline to feed into those roles as they become available at that next level. What we typically see from organizations is when they're evaluating high potential talent, they're looking more at competencies. And this is an example right now that you see on your screens where we're looking at skills, behaviors, experiences, knowledge, and potentially personality factors, and considering the organizational values. And competencies, this is a good profile, but as indicated, they're often frozen in the past. They may not always be updated. And what research typically shows is that, it's only a subset of those competencies. Really, some of the personality, the trait-based factors that are the ones that are really predicting who is going to be successful at a higher level. These are the things that tend to be more fixed. They're more difficult to develop over time. These are the things that, in many ways are fixed early on in our lives. That's what we believe that organizations should really focus on in terms of evaluating and identifying high potential talent. What I want to do now is show you Right Management's model of potential. This is a model that we've, developed fairly recently. We did a pretty thorough meta-analysis of all the other models that were out there, whether it was from other consulting firms, whether it was from multinational companies, local companies, and we got a team of global consultants together to work on this to see, what do we feel are the factors that are truly differentiating between those individuals that are successful at higher levels, and how do we measure it? And we came up with this model that you're seeing here, and we believe there are kind of three core elements to potential. The first of which is career drive and aspiration, and I'll talk about that more in a second. The second is agility, and we break agility out into three sub-factors, which you see on the right here: strategic agility, operational agility, and interpersonal agility. And then the third is organizational confidence and work performance. So let me just talk about each of these briefly. For us, one of the most important factors, and one of the things that I see organizations overlook consistently when managing high potential talent, is career aspiration and drive. A lot of times organizations will place people into these secretive high potential pools without actually ever asking them if they aspire to take on a higher level of responsibility. Do they aspire to move higher within the organization, to move upwards within the organization? What we find is sometimes people are happy with where they are, or maybe they want to become an expert, maybe they want to expand laterally. So for us, the most important thing when beginning to identify who are your high potential talent was, we need to get a sense of where they want to go and what their aspiration is. And so, that's why we think that career aspiration and drive is really foundational. And that's the first step. Once you determine if somebody has that career aspiration and drive, and there's a number of ways you can do it. You can actually ask them directly. You can collect that information through interviews, questionnaires, or even possibly some psychometrics. Then we start to look at other predictors, other factors that we have found to enable success at higher leadership levels. This is where we start to look at the agility factors. And we have three different breakdowns here: strategic agility, operational agility, and interpersonal agility. So you can see within each agility factor we've got subcomponents. So looking at strategic agility, this is really kind of the higher level mindset. We're looking at, cognitive capacity. Somebody's ability to kind of make sense out of chaos. How change agile are they? How flexible are they? How are they able to navigate complex financial figures? How are they able to navigate complex operations? How are they able to look externally and make sense of things? Those are the things that we look for in terms of strategic agility. Interpersonal agility has kind of two elements to it. So interpersonal in terms of how they're relating to others, that kind of confidence factor, their ability to have some emotional intelligence, to demonstrate empathy and resilience, but also kind of an intrapersonal aspect. So how well they know themselves. So there's some self-insight, self-awareness factors in there as well that we feel are important contributors to interpersonal agility. And then finally, operational agility. And operational agility is all about getting things done in complex organizations, navigating through that complexity, dealing with in a multicultural, complex environment, demonstrating a global mindset, being able to influence different types of people from different cultures or at different levels within an organization, and really executing, getting things done and driving results. So these are the three factors that we look at in terms of agility. Now the third component is organizational confidence and work performance. So we saw earlier that work performance is one of the key factors that most organizations look at in terms of potential. And we think that's important as well. We think that in order for somebody to be a high potential, they have to demonstrate a certain track record of performance. But we also want to know is, kind of this gut feeling factor, and we call it organizational confidence. Do you have the confidence that this individual has the capability to be successful at a higher level? And, one of the ways that we want to bring some objectivity to that process is to measure it. So we felt that it was absolutely critical to measure each of the elements within the model, to do so in a valid way. And what you're seeing here is an example of a dashboard report that we might create for an organization to help them get deeper insights in terms of their talent. So looking at a person's potential against each of those agility factors, and then stack ranking them in terms of high fit, moderate fit, and low fit. So this is where we're bringing some data to the discussion. This is where we're bringing some objectivity to the discussion. And typically we're presenting that back to an organization and asking that organizational confidence question. Do you have the confidence that this individual, based on the data that you see here, based on the level of performance that they've demonstrated, sometimes we're asking about mobility, sometimes we're asking about engagement as well. Do you think that they have the confidence to be successful at that next level? And, that's going to drive a much more fruitful discussion than simply a manager making some subjective judgment around whether or not somebody can be successful at a higher level. And, this is where we can take that data and we can start to plot people into either a 9-box chart, a 4-box chart, a 6-box chart. These are ways that organizations typically look to map out their talent, those individuals that have the potential to grow into future roles, those individuals that are probably going to stay at the level that they're at, maybe expand laterally, those individuals that may be within the wrong roles and maybe need to be redeployed elsewhere. So taking a look at that data, this allows you to really kind of be more objective in evaluating where somebody fits into that process. So this is one way that we start to look at potential. This is one way that we feel can bring more objectivity to the process. This is one way that we feel that organizations can begin to be more systematic in terms of identifying high potential talent. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Sarah Wong, who can really kind of bring this to life for you in terms of how Associated British Foods is going about identifying and managing their high potential talent, particularly their talent within China, as part of a great program that they did called the China Acceleration Program. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. This is really my great pleasure to be here to share ABF's story with you. So just before I introduce what we did in terms of high potential development, and then I would like to introduce briefly about ABF. ABF actually was one of the first Western companies to invest in China when it invested East Production a long time ago. It falls in Maui division, which is one of our divisions. And then in the following just decades, that China has become more and more important growth area for our global operations. And then ABF has established more than 50 legal entities in China with total investment of over 6 billion renminbi, and employees has reached about more than 10,000 people currently. To support the continued growth and expansion of China operations, we need to develop more robust pipeline of leaders. So the initial priorities have been set to grow local leaders at the Managing Director -1 and Managing Director -2 levels. So then we thought about to introduce China Acceleration Program to our employees, to our high potentials in China. So why is that? Because to introduce CAP, then we want to develop ABF's leadership capability in China, because then that falls into the business strategy. Then also assist in retention of high potential staff. Retention is never satisfactory to us, so we wanted to improve in this regard. Then also accelerate new joiners into ABF, because we have found that we have brought in a lot of great leaders into our company, but to integrate them quickly to our culture and our operations was a challenge, was one of the challenges that we were facing. Also, to provide access to range of practical and theoretical leadership models to our high potentials and our leaders, because we had some of our very senior leaders who had really great experience and also track records, but they came from the company that we have acquired in the past. So they are very experienced, but we would like them to be enhanced on business knowledge, so that they can better communicate with our global headquarters, etc. Then also one of the purposes is to enhance individual performance and capability, no doubt. Also create peer networks across ABF in China, because ABF is, in terms of organization, we're quite decentralized, and people work in their business silo, so we would like to just create a platform that so that the employees can network and collaborate more. Also generate self-insight, which relates to the workplace, and improve knowledge of ABF's businesses. Finally, to use it as a motivational tool, so that people feel more engaged with our company. The next page that you can see, this is the model that actually we operated with the China Acceleration Program, together with the right management. That's why I'm so happy to have Sean here, because we worked together to work on this China Acceleration Program. So from this model, you can tell that these are the key steps that we have gone through. The first one, actually, we spent the first phase really very carefully to ensure that we get things right from the very beginning. So by understanding the overall strategy and business imperatives in mind, and then we have taken a series of key stakeholders interviews. Then we engaged with key stakeholders, for example, the MDs and HR directors, and also headquarter business leaders and HR leaders. So we have put in place a very comprehensive communication strategy, so that we ensure that all parties are aware of the initiative and get the expectations managed appropriately. Then the next step is to get back to a pillar that we define succession factors. Then this is where actually we define what leadership success looks like that the target levels are focusing on. So based on the key elements in the success profile, then we design together with right management, and we designed a very comprehensive assessment process to ensure that it is reliable, and then all the elements of the success profile is measured. So from there, then the execution plan was designed to deliver the assessment. So the assessment actually, it varies from online, face-to-face, individual or group-based assessments. A lot of participants actually, they were very excited about the assessment process. Finally, a lot of people were saying that they learned also from the assessment process. The result of the assessments then will be used to provide feedback both at the individual and organizational level. Then together with right management, we got a really great help from right management that we outline an acceleration strategy that we will enable them to successfully transition to the next level. So finally, the program has been kicked off and put in place. We also designed the metrics and measurement to ensure that the program is really delivered successfully. Okay. Then the business challenges and imperatives that we encountered at that time was, first of all, attracting, developing, and retaining talent. As I said already, actually, developing people from the assessment, it was one of the strengths that our people had, but still we thought that it would be even strengthen this area which we have already done quite well. So still we have put it into the design. And then the second is to improve efficiency and organizational effectiveness. So stronger business acumen needed to be driven in this area. Then the third challenge is technology and knowledge transfer. The fourth one is leverage and enhance the brand. We found that people tend to be more internal focused rather than external focused. So lower level of customer focus and strategic orientation may impact ability to build the brand. That's why this is also one of the challenges that we were facing at that time. So the next page actually tells the program outline. This is the program overview that you can tell. We work together with right management, and it has been broken into two major parts. One is residential workshops. The other one is application learning activities. So in the first one, that we have broken it down into 4 modules. In each of the modules, we focus on one development area, which was outlined from the assessment result. Also, on that residential module, then we also have the people work on the action learning projects. So you can tell from the second part, which is application learning activities, then we have all along the journey, we have the team coaching and mentoring. We have also action learning via project assignments. So after we have kicked off the whole program, it lasted for about a little bit over a year. Now it has been completed with all the residential programs, training programs. Then, but we all know that this is not a finish. This is just the start of the new journey. And then that's why after the workshop, after all the action learning projects is finished and the presentation and report has already been done to the senior executives and sponsors, then we still manage the career conversation. So helping the employees and participants to understand who am I, where I want to go, and also how do I get there. So to modify their personal development plan, because they have got their personal development plan right after the assessment experience. But now, after the whole learning journey, and then we would like to review and help them to revise it, to make it more appropriate. So this is still ongoing. And after the first phase of career conversations, actually we assist the HR colleagues in each BU to continuously revisit their development plan and revisit their career conversations. That's the program that we have already done so far. So after this program, we clearly see the benefits. We have got the opportunity and platform for peer network and best practice sharing. A lot of collaborations were going on at that time, and it created a new habit that people started to talk to each other, to share the best practices, and it simply just created a community among the participants, and also they are introducing this new habit to other employees. The other benefit is about we have found there is certainly better engagement, more sense of belongings after the program, and during the program we hear from people that they feel more proud of being here. Also, we've got a clear picture of bench strength, especially with MD-1 and MD-2, who are ready and who need more time to move further. And also, which is very exciting, that we see immediate impact from action learning projects. Some of the action learning project results has been immediately used in business environment, and now we have seen that it's bringing impact already. The other thing is that this is something made me very happy, that from the final evaluation from the participants, then we found ROI is rated the highest factor from the feedback factors, and we asked a lot of questions, but then ROI rated the highest. Well, let me think what else I can share with you. So the whole experience of identifying and developing the high potentials and key employees that we have done recently, I found that the China Acceleration Program is really a very exciting program. Then we brought a lot of management attention. Then it is really a high-profile program. Action learning has been very, very welcomed, both by the organization and participants. The key learnings is actually during the program, during the 12-15 months, several participants dropped off in the middle. So that actually links with today's subject, that how do we select, how do we measure people that are brought into this program. At the very beginning, we thought we struggled about whether it is should be based on selection basis or nomination basis. Then we felt into nomination basis. So this is the lesson learned. Also, one key learning is that management attention and support is highly motivated to the participants. Also, BU HR's engagement is important. The program customization is also very important, not only the standard leadership program, but also it is better to customize it, link it with the industry, link with the business. Also support from the direct management direct manager is very important, and we found that some are just very few, but still there are some participants during the program that they seemed too busy and they were overwhelmed by the workload. So we just hope that if we have the next round, that if manager can provide more support to the participants, and then the effectiveness will be even better. That's the story that I have so far. I'm glad that I'm happy to answer any questions if anything brought into your interest.
With all your questions. So we have around 15 minutes, and what we'll do is I'll direct the questions to Sean and Sarah. So one of the questions that we have here that has come in is, what percentage of people are identified as high potentials?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Typically, I think what you're looking at is around maybe 3 to 5% of the organization could fit within that category of high potential. That seems to be the general consensus based on the research that I've seen. It's a small portion of the organization that really fits within that category. It's pretty exclusive, and it's something that is, this is a discussion that we constantly have with organizations. Is, once you're nominated as a high potential, it's not something that's given to you. It's something that you have to continue to earn, and it's something that will continue to be reevaluated over time. So that's the general percentage that we've seen from the research.
The other question that we have is, how do you assess the effectiveness of the HYPO program?
So, with each program, there's always going to be certain organizational specific success factors. And, for us, it's really important that we have that discussion up front before we even get started and in really designing the program to get a sense of, what success looks like at the end of the day. And there are a number of ways that organizations look at it. One very common way to look at it is to see what percentage of the leadership positions are filled from internal talent. And are you seeing a higher percentage of those roles being filled by internal candidates after the program than you did before? So ideally, you're reducing external recruitment costs and some of the factors that are associated with that. The way that we're doing it with ABF is we have a partnership with Metrics That Matter that allows us to really look at the impact of the high potential program, both from an individual standpoint and from an organizational standpoint. And I know that this is a topic that's going to be focused on, I think, later on in the HYPO week. So I don't want to get too much into detail because I think there's more coming in the future on that. But it's a series of surveys that we do that we collect data from the individual midway through a program, at the end of a program, and then usually somewhere 3 to 6 months after the program. And we also get feedback from the manager as well. Sometimes we're getting behavioral feedback too against competencies. But Metrics That Matter also has a series of specific questions that they ask that allow us to go back and really compare some of the business impact that we're seeing from the respondents through the surveys and comparing that to the initial investment that was made in the program, and start to actually calculate that into ROI as well. So that's one way that we do it. Again, there'll be a much more comprehensive discussion around this later on in the week. I think it's on day 4. So would encourage you to tune into that session for more detailed information.
Thank you, Sean. Another question which has come in is there any different process for identifying high potentials, between freshers, new employees, or experienced employees?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one that commonly comes up. So if we're looking at a new employee, if we're looking at an emerging leader versus an experienced leader, does the criteria change or differ? And kind of the answer to that question is yes and no. So right management's perspective are that the factors that you saw in our high potential model, we feel transcend leadership levels. So what we wanted to do in creating that model was to really drill down to what we believe were the foundational elements of high potential success. And so in order to be successful at higher levels within the organization, all of those factors need to be present. Now what we typically do with organizations is we make the model organizational specific. That's another important factor. We don't believe there's a universal model. We think that the model should be customized to the organization. So what we try to do is track things over time and see which are stronger predictors in the model, which elements are predicting high potential success stronger than others, and apply some weightings to that. And typically what you see is the higher up you go in the organization, the more emphasis is put around the strategic agility factors. So we may start to weigh that more heavily than some of the other factors that are more equally weighted, I would say, at an entry level or emerging level leader.
Another question that's come in is, how does the hyper program accelerate, the same for new joinees in an organization?
Yeah, this was, and Sarah, maybe you can jump in too. I'll share my perspective first, and then you can add on to it.
Okay.
So this was unique to ABF. So ABF not only wanted a program that would help to identify, evaluate, and accelerate more of the legacy talent within the organization, but also to find a way to accelerate some of the new joiners. And I think that ABF was pretty specific and selective in terms of which new joiners, new leaders would be a part of the program. So one of the things that ABF has that I think really enables it to be one of the best-in-class organizations in terms of high potential talent management is they have a clearly defined model of potential. With anchors, with rating systems that really help to try to bring more objectivity to that process. So not only was that process used in terms of a series of internal people reviews to identify who were the internal talent that would be part of the program, but also for the new joiners, it served as a benchmark for them as well. So, based on the information that they gathered through the selection process and the interviews and what they know about those new joiners, they also tried to make an objective evaluation as to whether or not this is somebody who could also kind of fit into that high potential pool. So some of the new joiners were included in the program as well. The expectations, I think, were different for them. I don't think that these were individuals that are marked for certain roles. The goal, I think, for them was really to enable effectiveness at current level first, rather than really try to grow them to that next level, which was probably more the emphasis for the internally selected talent. Sarah, anything else you want to add to that?
I think you have given a very comprehensive answer already, and thank you very much. That tells the story. Actually, the CAP China Acceleration Program was designed specifically for two bunch of people. One is high potential. The other one is the new joiners at MD-1 level. They have really very good experience elsewhere already, but then we wanted to utilize the talent development mechanisms to help them to faster and better integrate with the companies. So in this program that they very quickly learned the environment and how we operate, and also had a chance to learn the models that we use, and at the same time had a lot of chance to talk to other business leaders who have been very experienced in our environment. So I think the rest, actually, Sean, you have already indicated very clearly. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sarah. Another great question that's come in is, Sean, we heard you saying that a few organizations use systemic methods of identifying high potentials. So could you suggest any assessment tools? And secondly, if it's really need not be organization driven, but is there anything individuals can do to understand where he or she stands?
So in terms of assessments, we certainly have some perspective at Right Management in terms of assessments that we like to use. So we actually, in the development of our model that we showed you, we partnered with Hogan Assessments. Many of you may be familiar with Hogan Assessments. They're one of the leaders globally in terms of personality-based assessments. And we really like Hogan because they look at personality from a variety of different lenses, what's really enabling success, what's getting in the way, and what's really kind of driving that from a values standpoint. And so we have mapped the Hogan suite of assessments to our high potential model, again, to kind of get at those leadership DNA factors and bring some objectivity to that process. But we also like to combine the Hogan assessments with other assessments. So a lot of times we're using some cognitive ability assessments to look at some of the brain power, critical thinking skills. So a good example is the Ravens. Watson Glazer are two tools that we use to look at cognitive abilities. And then we also like to use assessment centers as well. To start to look at some of those factors and begin to put some definition around readiness. And that's really, I think, the value that the assessment center can bring to it, because we can put an individual in a simulated environment at that next level that we're evaluating them for. And depending on how well they perform during that simulation or the assessment center, that's going to tell us, it's going to be one indicator in terms of how ready they might be to take on the types of challenges at that next level. So those are some of the assessments that we look at. And then the other one I mentioned is career aspiration. So a lot of times we're creating what we call a career aspiration questionnaire, where we're asking the participant directly, do you aspire to take on higher level leadership challenges? And are you mobile? And sometimes we'll even look at engagement factors as well. So those are some of the ways that we try to get at that. And Tuhina, remind me of the second part of that question.
Okay. So the second part of the question is, if it's for the individual, is there something that they can do to understand where they stand?
Well, that's a good question. And I think that probably varies considerably from organization to organization. One of the things that we emphasized in the China Acceleration Program with ABF was the critical role that the manager plays in the process in driving career growth and driving career development. So I think that one of the key messages that we gave to all participants within the program, that it's their responsibility to drive and manage their careers. The managers are going to support them along the way. The organization is going to provide additional resources to help them achieve their career aspirations and their goals, but it's up to them to drive and manage that process. And that means that those participants need to proactively engage their manager in career discussions. So one way to start to get a feel of that is to sit down with your manager and have some career discussions. Put your aspirations out on the table. Be very clear, here's where I want to go. How can, what does that look like within the organization? How does that fit into the organization's needs? Think about where the organization is going strategically and how you could fit into that roadmap. So I think having a dialogue with your manager is a good starting point, and certainly engaging HR in that process as well would be my advice.
Okay, Sean, an additional question to the one previously asked is, basically the talent pool is identified first and then you have an assessment center which is conducted. So how does the assessment center actually complement the findings of the earlier steps?
Well, what we're trying to do is drive what we call incremental validity. So what we're trying to do with the assessment center and combining multiple assessments is really to piece together a picture of who the individual is. So what drives them? What are some of the personality factors that could impact their work performance or their potential as a leader? What are their critical reasoning skills? What are their aspirations and drive? So that's really going to look at some of those foundational factors within the model. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the assessment center is going to start to give us a sense of, okay, well, how do they stand up against the benchmark for success at that next level? And let's put them in a simulated environment that is going to allow them the opportunity to demonstrate those behaviors. And to what degree do they demonstrate those behaviors? Are they highly effective as they go about this process, or do they struggle? So they should be complementary. And a lot of times we'll see people that have very, very strong scores in terms of the agility factors. They'll have strong scores in cognitive ability assessments. They'll have all the aspiration and drive. But when they go through the assessment center, they struggle. And typically the advice as a result of that to the organization that's managing this individual's career is to say, look, they need some more time. And they're not ready to take that jump. We feel that the raw material is there for you to build off of. We think they've got what it takes, but you need to invest in developing those skill sets and those capabilities to enable them to be successful at that next level. And I think that's part of the value the assessment center can really drive.
Okay, so we have one last question here, and I know all of you have written many questions, and we'll try to see how we can answer them later. This is about what is the ideal level at which high potential identification should begin?
We really think it should start at the individual contributor level. Our perspective is that this process, looking back at that leadership capability framework slide that we had showed earlier, high potentials exist at multiple levels within the organization. And if you are thinking about, well, we don't really have anything in place at this point, so where should we start? Well, typically my advice to that organization is to think about, okay, well, where are you going from a business standpoint? What does that look like over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the key imperatives that you're driving? What are the challenges that you're currently facing? And then as you, assess your organization, where are you most at risk? What is going to be the key leverage point? Is it going to be your middle manager level in terms of driving those business imperatives? Or are you most at risk at more of a senior level? So start where you're most at risk, where you're thinnest from a benchmark perspective. And that requires looking back at some data, and assessing where you're going. And my suggestion is to start there and build leadership's commitment around the process, make sure that they own this process. I think it can be driven by HR, but it should be owned by leadership, and use it as a pilot to really, systematically implement this as a formal talent planning process within the organization at all levels of the leadership capability framework.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for answering all these questions for us. Thank you, Sarah. So I know that a lot of you have written many more questions, and since we have some of these questions would also be answered in the next upcoming 3 webinars which we have following today. So we will try to answer those questions in those webinars. What we are also going to do is we will consolidate all the unanswered questions and try to see that if they don't get answered in any of these webinars, we will write back to you and try to share our viewpoint whenever possible. So first of all, I'd like to thank Sean and Sarah for taking this time and sharing their thoughts with us. Really appreciate all of this, and thank you to all the participants definitely for joining in and making this event really interesting and interactive, in the sense that we've got to hear your viewpoints on what you think identifying high potentials is all about, and really appreciate all the questions that you have written in to us with, and we hope to answer them soon. We also thank People Matters, and we really hope that the next upcoming webinars we really get to interact with all of you even more. So hope that all of you have been have registered for the upcoming webinars. You've got your registration details. If not, please do write in to us, and we'll try to see how we can kind of help you out. And we do look forward to meeting you there again. Thank you, everyone. And I hope all of you have also got a copy of the newsletter, which would have gone out to your email IDs. Thank you. Vikram, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Tuheena. And thank you, everyone, on behalf of People Matters for joining in the webinar. I'm sure we've collectively been able to gain some finer insights about high potential identification that we can all take back to our organizations. Thank you, Sean and Sarah, for sharing these great insights. And as Tuheena mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our series of webinars on some of the other important aspects of high potential management across the week. And I hope to see you all tomorrow at the same time. Thank you so much.